Hello everyone, welcome to SmartBear Academy QAComplete 301. I'm joined here in the SmartBear studio in Somerville, Massachusetts with Param, one of our technical engineers. And we are going to get started in just about a minute or two, just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. This class is being recorded. We are doing things a little bit differently from previous classes with the recordings, so we will be sending them out via GoToWebinar. So you should expect a link to the recording that will give you access to the video. If you've registered, you will get access right away. If you forward it to someone on your team who is not registered for today's class, all they'll have to do is put in their information and then they can view the recording. So any questions, just email us at customers@smartbear.com if you have any trouble with that. And like always, we'd love to make these classes as interactive as possible, so please add your questions into the questions pane. Param will take periodic breaks to answer some questions, and we do have Jeff Martin, product owner, on hand too as well at the end to tag in for some additional questions too that you may have. And at the end, take a moment to fill out the exit survey. We want to know your feedback, how the class was, future topics you want to know about, so we can build out the next quarter's 101, 201, and 301 based on topics that you're interested in. So part of the training with SmartBear Academy, we do hold these quarterly, so this is the end of the three-part series, 101, 201, and 301. We will be starting 101 next month. Like I said, any specific topics, put those into the exit survey when you exit. Premium training due as well. We have some offerings through some of our service partners. Now, if you were at SmartBear Connect last week, they were one of our sponsors. They were there. So definitely, if you have any questions, talk to your SmartBear customer success rep or your account rep on additional premium topics. And this link I will send into the chat box. This is the product hub for QAComplete. Details all about the training, has the links for the training classes. We will be hosting our 101 next month, also out of our Galway office, and we have some of our future registered classes for the 201, and we will get the 301 updated on that site as well. So thank you. Today's team, we've met myself, Dana, Param. We will have a guest appearance from Jeff at the end, on hand for any questions. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand it over to Param to quickly go over the agenda and then get started with the training. So thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Dana, for the kind introduction. As she said, my name is Param Chopra, one of the sales engineers here at SmartBear Software. Today we're going to be talking about continuous integration in general as it relates to our test products, specifically QAComplete and TestComplete. First of all, I'll do is I'll give a brief introduction on continuous integration for maybe those of you who are unsure, unaware of what it is, and just to establish a premise. From there, we'll talk about triggering tests from Jenkins, a popular open source build automation tool used in CI practices. We'll talk about using our REST API to get those results in QAComplete. The whole point is to allow you to perhaps execute outside of QAComplete, but still take advantage of our in-house storage and reporting system. Finally, we'll talk about some strategies of actually implementing this properly, as well as just strategies and properties of implementing CI in general. And maybe my product owner Jeff can also stop by and offer his thoughts. And of course, throughout the webinar, as Dana said, please feel free to ask any questions at all, and I'll make sure to take periodic breaks to stop and check. So please don't be shy. All right. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Let me just. All right, and we're good on the screen. Excellent. Okay. So everyone can see QAComplete on their screens. First, what I'm going to do is quickly just talk about continuous integration in general. And so, in general, continuous integration is the practice of merging, all developer working copies to a shared mainline or shared repository several times a day, right? And the idea is that instead of having to deal with painful merge requests and having a static workflow regarding code changes, you could have a build automation tool or a process trigger regression tests, trigger tests to run automatically based off a new build. The idea is that because you're continually testing your code, so throughout the day, merging becomes a lot simpler of a task, right? You don't have to go and talk to your coworker or peer and say, hey, this source code is a little different than what I'm merging to, so on and so forth. With CI and getting all that continuous updating, you're most likely going to get the most up-to-date code you can get if you decide to make any changes. And there's a lot of different best practices regarding CI. Obviously you want to be able to maintain a code repository with it. You can automate your builds. You can make your builds self-testing if you'd like. So some of the tool like Jenkins, every time you get a new build from source control, they can kick off your test cases. And the last great idea, which is kind of also central to a tool like QAComplete, is that with CI you can centralize all your workflow to a single place. So even if you have developers or testers working around the world, working across offices, all their work can be baselined in one single area, so you have true visibility and traceability in your testing process. So that's a high level on continuous integration. We're going to talk a little bit about what that actually looks like in the real world here, and I'll later talk about maybe some reasons why you should pursue this if, let's say, you're not doing so already in your automated testing efforts. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hop over to Jenkins over here. So I have a little TestComplete test running from Jenkins. It's really cool, actually. No coding required. We have a nice free plugin for Jenkins and TestComplete. When taking a look at your configuration for your new job in Jenkins, first you want to download a TestComplete plugin. That can be found in the Jenkins add-on section. It's completely free. Once you do so, you can go ahead and build TestComplete test. In this case, whoops, what's going on here? There we go. Okay, we're back. The cable just got loose. Regardless, as you can see here, all I have to do is add my project suite file, or project suite. I think we lost screen there, Dana. Any thoughts on that? 1 second here. Okay. Don't exactly know what happened there. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Sorry about that, everybody. So where were we? Jenkins, right? So as you can see, all I had to do was give Jenkins my project suite file in TestComplete. But of course, you can maybe specify that to be a specific project or specific test itself. So in the case of this example, just one test case in our project, keeping things simple. From there, I decided my test runner. You can either do TestComplete or even test execute. The version you want to use, any action line warnings, any specific error stuff you want to do, even some command line argument stuff you want to do as well. Maybe you're running a browser in safe mode, or you want to launch TestComplete, test execute under certain conditions. You can easily do that through this form here. And lastly, all you have to do is allow TestComplete and Jenkins to establish a user session on your computer by giving Jenkins your login information and screen resolution. And that's it. Lastly, I'm going to talk about how to get the support in QAComplete as well. Definitely want to click Generate MH2 log file so we can get that TestComplete report right in our Jenkins view. And so as you can see, that's simple. And once I set my build up, I can go ahead and trigger. I'm not going to have TestComplete on. I could have it off. And really, the more real-world case would, let's say to be TestComplete might not even be on your machine, right? I'd be working on this machine, and I could be running a case that is launching on a completely separate machine, maybe around the world. That's the idea here, right? I can work remotely and still heavily affect the testing or source code I'm trying to work with from a different location. And so I'm going to show you guys how to run a test from Jenkins, what that looks like. Then we'll talk about how I got those results in QAComplete while actually triggering from QAComplete. So let's click Build. And Jenkins will do is it will launch TestComplete via our plugin. I guess you can't really see TestComplete running right now. It's running on my other screen. Oh, there it is. There's our little app. It's as simple as a C# app. Keep it simple for this example. And so the idea with CI here is that usually to get your test results in QAComplete, you need to execute from QAComplete, right? Using the play button, using the test scheduling system, something like that. But a lot of people don't want to execute from QAComplete. They don't want to use a GUI. They want to use something more automated, like a Jenkins or even a Windows scheduler on a command line. So we want to still be able to allow you to get your results in the QAComplete. So now that this build is finished, I'm going to talk about how we did that. So first, let's take a look at this finished build. As you can see, I could look at the Jenkins style result, or I could go ahead and look at the TestComplete test results here. And the beauty of this little plugin is I get the full TestComplete log file here with full functionality, screenshots, steps, all that kind of great stuff. Now, this is certainly useful, but maybe your developers are working on a Jenkins, but your testers aren't, right? And your testers are working solely out of a tool like QAComplete. So it'd be in their benefit to have this kind of report there, or the corresponding test case. Well, if I go to QAComplete, that was a simple UI test for my orders application. I can actually go right to QAComplete, and I can see, oh, I got a new run, ran today, and I can even get the new report right here. And so the beauty of this is that I didn't have to go ahead and launch from QAComplete at all. I was able to get this the same exact information you saw in Jenkins with simple API scripting. And the beauty is there's multiple ways to do that, but I did a very simple way all through TestComplete. So as you can see here, I have a nice continuous integration setup where I launched from Jenkins. Maybe Jenkins was triggered by my Git integration or something like that. It triggers off of my test run. Then after my test run ends, the data is put automatically into QAComplete. So not only do I have visibility of what exactly happened in my test case and all phases of testing and all parts of it, but I can allow all my teams to have access to the same data as well. Whether my team is working out of Jenkins, working solely out of TestComplete, working out of QAComplete, or even maybe Jira, let's say that. Now we can certainly export these to Jira as well through our integration or through an API. Let's go ahead and talk about how exactly I did this. So QAComplete is an open RESTful API, and it's certainly useful in creating records, extracting records, or in this case, creating and updating test runs. So I didn't click any play button, but simply what I did was, let's actually open up TestComplete to do this. I edited my TestComplete test to have a couple extra methods to put the data in QAComplete. So what I'll do now is I'll walk you through what exactly I did, and then I'll speak about a couple different strategies on maybe what you could have done differently to achieve the same results I'm showing you. So pull up the project here. All right. And this time I'm going to quickly check if we have any questions about people are seeing. All right, no questions as of now. Again, feel free to ask if you guys don't understand something or any questions that do come up. All right, though, we have TestComplete here. And add a keyword test right here that simply just is what was just running for you before. It runs through my little orders desktop, fills out an order form, deletes that form, and closes the app. Very simple, easy test. I could have added some checkpoints here if I wanted to, but we kept it pretty simple for the sake of example. What I did was that I converted the test into a script, which you can do the simple right-click convert, TestComplete. And here's my script. And so this is my test case as it runs. And so here are the steps now after I ran this test case. All right, great. The data is going to be in Jenkins and it's going to be in TestComplete, but I want the data in QAComplete. So here are my steps. Step 1. You need to save TestComplete's log file to somewhere on your local machine or VM, somewhere where REST API and QAComplete can have access to it, right? And so as you can see here, at the end of my test run, I simply just save my result as an MHT file in a quick local folder, TC test that I created in my C drive. It'd be in your benefit to store this temporary file in a location which is easily accessible, maybe something that won't require authentication, stuff like that. I mean, you ultimately want to make your life as simple as possible. Of course, if you need to authenticate, there are ways to do that with scripting in TestComplete. That's the first step. Step 1, save my log file externally. So it's going to have the entire result for this UI test here. Now the second step is going to be a post request to our QAComplete REST API. The idea is I'm going to create a new test run in QAComplete. Now the only data you need for this, you need the test ID and the run by host ID, and then of course the project ID. So in QAComplete, I minimize that. I can find my project ID under the setup tab. If I go to any of my projects and click that project, edit it, and I'll get its project ID right here. And usually if you're having a good correspondence between your TestComplete tests and QAComplete projects, you probably just hard code that project ID in. You don't even need to parametrize that, right? Unless maybe your use cases you're working out of a lot of different projects. From there, you can get the test ID by taking any test case. There's a test ID right there. Then run by host ID will be found under the test host section. There's my, for example, this is the computer I'm giving this webinar on. There's my host ID. So those are the 3 pieces of information I need to go and start making some of these API calls. So let me go back to TestComplete. And so all I did was, I believe in my API call here, I hard-coded the project ID in, and I've done it throughout, although for some other fields you'll see I parameterize them. Then I've hard-coded the test ID and run by host ID. Now, I'll speak about maybe what you want to parameterize a little bit later on, but just take an example here, I have hard-coded probably a decent amount of this just to make sure it works. But test ID, luckily, is only something you need to use once, so you can probably get away with hard-coding it.
We have a great question, actually, that came in before you segue over, Param.
Sure.
The question was, what if I have a combination of Selenium and TestComplete scripts? Can I still get results in QAComplete if I'm using test execute to drive execution?
So the answer to that is certainly yes. So QAComplete interfaces with TestNG, JUnit, and NUnit style frameworks from Selenium, but you can actually go ahead and update our test agent to really accept any kind of framework we want, as long as we're willing to do the work of changing the agent. So technically, yes, you could easily have Jenkins kickoff, a Selenium run, and a TestComplete run, and there might be other better ways if those are 2 different kinds of testing platforms to get the data all, let's say, for your corresponding test cases in QAComplete. This first example here, I'm like literally put the code within my test case. But I'll speak about some other ways to do that, maybe even including Selenium. All right. All right, other questions? TestComplete step by step, start to end would be great. Yep, of course, Chris, is exactly what we're going to try and do here. Show you exactly what I did. So, we're looking at the step here. There's a post request. The idea of this post request is to create a new test run in QAComplete. That's the first step. As you can see, I have my test ID. You really only need to use it once, so if you have a nice one-to-one correspondence to your test case here, test case in QAComplete, just go ahead and hard code that. Same with the run by host ID. That's usually going to be pretty same, unless you do distributed testing. You may want to parameterize that, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit later. From there, and this is all in Python, by the way. You can use JavaScript, JScript, C# script, C++ script, or even Delphi or VB if you want to write this in as well. Or you can do this via the command line, of course. But this is using Python. I'm using the requests library up here, and I'm simply passing in my post request the URL, the data, of course, pointed out here, my header content type, and of course my authorization. Looks like I'm going to have to change my QAComplete password after this webinar, but that's all right. So that's my first step, and I'm making sure I have some nice sanity checks here to make sure I'm getting proper response back. That's the second step. So again, first step, put the log in a local location. Second step, create a run in QAComplete for the corresponding test case. Now, the second step, we need a piece of data called the item ID from QAComplete. It's a backend piece of data that we used internally before we exposed these REST API methods. And so now you're going to have to get this ID to patch your run, meaning update the results for that QAComplete run, as well as update the log file from TestComplete. First, we need to get this item ID. So all I did was I captured my response text from the post call, which will actually have my, I believe, test run ID, convert it into a Python dictionary, and I query the data from the key value of ID. And so now I have this very handy test run ID, which is another piece of data I need. So now, to finish the get, now I need to get the item ID. So the three pieces of data you'll always need is your project ID, which is your covered, hard-coded. You need test run ID, and you need the item ID. So we have a test run ID now, so now we can go ahead and get the item ID. We're going to have a get command to do that. And so convert my test run ID to a string, so I can throw it in my API, or sorry, my API request. And as you can see here, I can parameterize that, right? Okay, I can take that, always capture that variable, convert it into a string, and then add it into my URL. So you're working with a lot of different, run IDs. Maybe you're running a test set or test suite. You can easily attach a, a data-driven list against that and then parameterize that value. But I go ahead and put my run ID in that URL along with the project ID. And again, same kind of response, except this is a get this time. I'll make sure I always check my response to make sure I have a nice 200 passing code. Then from there, I need to get the item ID. So I, again, convert it into Python dictionary. A couple ways you can do this. You could use, in this case, Python has, JSON has got a loads function that could do that. But even the request library has the JSON function that will also convert it into a Python dictionary. Either one is fine. Then I query my results back for the item ID. And so I get that. That's the second step. Third step will be the patch method. So again, to review, first step, store my log file. Second step, I guess this will be the fourth. So first is to save my log file locally. Second is to create a run in QAComplete. Third is to get my test run ID and test and item ID. Now the fourth thing is to update my results step. So I have three things I need to update my results. I have my project ID, hard-coded, my run ID, and now the newly found item ID. So I can go ahead and, of course, I can parameterize these values depending on what I find and what I get. And then I want to throw my data in as a patch. And so there's some extra fields you could fill out here. You know, the release ID if you're trying to have traceability. I didn't do that for this case, but that's a field, release ID, and you would find that in QAComplete, so you can get some traceability with your results. There's specific others in the minor fields. If you want to get some manual test data in, there's step-by-step results as well. This is a simple automated test, so I want to keep it simple. You have a critical here. Then I just know if the test is, going to stop on failure or not. I'm passing the run time, who ran it, no surprise it's me, what machine it's run on, and the status code. Now, I think I'm hard-coding the status code, but I could easily just test. I believe I was just lazy about this. There's a TestComplete method where I can get the run result for this test case based on a log. Easy. Again, I could go and pass it in and parameterize that. I think TestComplete only has two statuses, or it's three: pass, fail, and warning. QAComplete's got pass, fail, skipped, or blocked, but usually if you're running an automated test, you're not really skipping or blocking anything. So that's either going to be passed or failed. This case is going to be passed. I'm going to go ahead and fill that out. And again, I make sure my patch is good by checking it with a nice log message, little message here that I can verify my log. Final and fifth step, so we got the log file saved, created a run, got unnecessary field information for the later calls, then we uploaded the actual run information for that run. Final step is to, get the log file in. So this is going to be another post call. Here's my URL. Again, I have my items in the URL. Here is my MHT file. You can also upload an HTML file as well if you'd like. And from there, I'm just making sure, again, set an URL, files, authorization. Don't need the header here because then it's not technically JSON, it's just a pure file. So it's something to note. I'm going to do my sanity, so on and so forth. And so once all that's done, again, high level, save my log, create a run, get my necessary test-related data from QAComplete, update the run, update the log file. Nice 5 steps, and boom, you're done. You can update QAComplete without even touching the tool. So I've gone through that at a high level. Let's take a look at some questions we have before we take a look at what the results look like in QAComplete. All right. Can you trigger running a test set from Jenkins instead of a single test? Yeah, certainly. So for the sake of example here, in Jenkins, where's my Jenkins tab? All right. There it is. So in Jenkins, let's go back to my configure screen. The idea is that it's flexible. For the sake of example here, I have one test case in one project in one project suite. So I could have, specified that specific script or keyword test, right? I could have done it, but I might as well just keep it simple and run the whole project suite file. But if you want to run a test set, right, you could create that test set as a project playlist in TestComplete, then run that project test right here, or run the entire suite if you'd like as well. And so those of you who are unfamiliar with that, I bring over TestComplete. Say I have more than one test case, right? I can go ahead, click my project playlist, and I could, let's say, run my test case as many times as I'd like, or I could run multiple test cases and create that test set as I'd like. And so from here, I can easily trigger that from Jenkins so it runs multiple items. And of course, in that case, it might be good to either if you want, hard code your QA complete related information and teach test case, or parametrize, which are and data drive, which you're certainly able to do as well. Good question though. When results have been uploaded to QAComplete, can we send the report to a specific email group? So technically yes. There's a couple ways you can do that. If I take a look at QAComplete, so I have this right now, and trust me, when I was testing this, it was pretty irritating because I kept getting every single email about all my passes and fails. But take a look at our email alert section in QAComplete. We can have test cases passed or failed be automatically emailed to us, as well as creating any new email alerts that maybe emails it to a group of people or a certain person. And so they'll get an update of that run as well as a live link ID to that run, and from there they can go ahead and view the results. Something you can also do, TestComplete's end, is that, if I go into taking one of these, let's see, these latest run logs here, right? I could go ahead and export that log out. I can go ahead and directly export it out and email it to somebody else. But what's really cool is we can work with PowerShell in TestComplete. There, you could just use OLE objects to do that. So you can even have maybe a separate PowerShell script, right, where you're building your test case. You just pull that script over at the end, right? That would say, okay, we're going to throw this stuff into QAComplete and email to somebody. That PowerShell can easily interact with your Outlook if you're using that, or any kind of third-party email address, Gmail, and send this report out to somebody automatically. So you have a couple of ways. I'd say easiest, most non-technical ways using our email alerts in QAComplete, but you won't get the direct TestComplete file in your email. You get like a reference to it. If you want the file exactly, go ahead and script it in TestComplete. Certainly recommend it. Good questions though. All right, so to quickly recap here, talked about CI in general. I ran Jenkins TestComplete test from Jenkins, showed the results in QAComplete. Now talk about what I've done here. So now I want to talk about maybe what else could I have done to get the same result, right? Not everybody might not want to write all of this API code, all these API references within their test script, right? I did it for my use case because it's a simple use case. It's one test case. I don't need it to be portable, but maybe you do, right? And so you have a couple things you could do. What you could do, for example, is you could easily query the Jenkins API. I think I was trying to do that before I decided against it, just for my own sake of time here. But for example, Jenkins is an open REST API. This is not finished, but it's the same idea, right? I can go ahead, make sure. I think where's my Jenkins specific stuff? Okay, I might have actually deleted it. But regardless, Jenkins is an API, so it's not going to be here. But I can go ahead and query that for my TestComplete results and send it there. And you can add that as a batch file at the end of your Jenkins build, or even kick it off separately, right? And so you could easily siphon off all the code you see on your screen here into another module and have that kick off. That may be a nice way, so you have to, you don't have to mess with your test cases. Everything, that specific purpose, those specific methods are in a different location, so it kind of makes the workflow a little clearer. And of course, debugging is going to be a little easier, right? Because your code's in a different location. It's not going to interfere with your test case here, which you certainly would not want it to do. Other things you could do is simply, put all this in a different file, and like I did earlier with this other thing, simply go ahead and drag that script routine at the end, right? So I can easily have my script routine simply all be, the API requests I've shown you, have this, keep it, let's say my test in keyword test form, and then just run the script after as an executable step. And that's really nice as well because, as you know in TestComplete, I can build test cases out of other test cases, right? So I could easily reuse the script in as many different test cases as I'd like. Of course, the problem comes there, say, hey, maybe this different test case might be on a different project, might be under have a different test or run ID, right? So there's you got to think, okay, how do I want to set this up, right? Where's my data going to be coming from? And so when I talk about best practice for this, there's a lot of questions you want to ask yourself. How often are you pushing from Jenkins? How many tests are you running in an automated fashion? Are you running them in test sets? Are you running them standalone? What does that correspondence look like in QAComplete for you? What run information do you want in QAComplete? How often do you want to query? Those are questions you want to answer for yourself. And I'd say, if it's not that often, or if it's, not important for you to scale necessarily, the easiest way is going to put it right in your test case, right? That way TestComplete can locally handle everything. You don't have to query a Jenkins API or about some other batch file running and working. If you are trying to scale, you could do it in TestComplete, but I recommend taking this code, throwing it into a separate file, or even using a separate file itself outside of TestComplete, QAComplete, to do this data transfer. Now, even if you were to do it in TestComplete itself, you could attach any kind of DB with a 32-bit ODBC driver, SQL Server, Excel sheet, CSV file, to parameterize things like the project ID or the test ID, host ID, as well as what you find as the run and item ID as well. And so the way I'd say it is certainly it'll take some setup to understand what you want to do. But ultimately, just knowing really, I think the biggest things you want to parameterize is just that initial test ID, run ID, and project ID. Once you have a nice list of those, maybe in Excel, data driving against this, whether you want to do a simple data-driven loop or within your keyword test, right, by highlighting, setting a data loop, or by doing the same thing within your script, you could easily run through a lot of these. So the beauty there is then, not only can I push one test case in the QAComplete automatically, but I can push a whole suite in an automated fashion, right? Again, the idea with continuous integration, speed up everything. Get more code tested faster, and tested in an automated fashion, so you can spend your time building more test cases, running manual test cases, or running through newer production code. So as you can see, there's a lot of different ways you could do this, whether outside of TestComplete, outside of Jenkins, within Jenkins. And again, the key is you want to think about what does your optimal strategy look like for you. And also, from a realistic implementation perspective, right, because we don't want to take time away from you doing what you want to do in terms of your workday, how long you want to spend on this. If you have a lot of developers in your shop who are very comfortable with APIs, writing something like this would be a piece of cake for them. I'm not the best developer, definitely at this company, but it wasn't even that hard for someone like me, and I could certainly brush up my development skills. But any developer worth their salt, this is pretty simple. Of course, maybe you don't have people in your group who work with APIs, you don't script very heavily. Maybe then you want to think about some other approaches here. We also have some SE integration partners tasked up in Go-To Group. If you really don't want to write any code, they can obviously get the data in for you. Maybe set up even other nice data integrations with their platforms. But yeah, I'd say other than that, it's relatively straightforward. The nice thing is that all this documentation too, I learned how to do this not because I'm some genius that they train here at SmartBear. Now I learned the same way you guys do, all through the documentation. There's some nice lovely documentation here. And I think the most useful thing I could do is point out the methods I used within my TestComplete script. Let me go ahead and do that. So I'm here looking at the QAComplete REST API documentation. Under reference, we have test runs resources. And maybe if those of you who were looking at the API before, this is relatively new. We just recently exposed these. Again, the idea is saying we're going to make ourselves open to the CI market here. And so looking at these calls, the first one I used, so obviously that first step in TestComplete was to get my test saved, and that's a TestComplete method. It's just log.saveResultsAs, and you can either send it an HTML file or in this case an MHT file like I have. Then the second step, the post method, is simply this method right here. And as you can see, if I go ahead and click it, the description is creates a new test run in QAComplete. So that's how you know that's the one you want. Create that initial run. You need basic authentication, as I showed you in my API call. As you can see, all we need is the server name, whether it's your local server or app.qacomplete.com if you're SaaS, and the project ID. On the body, you can set up some other things, maybe using configurations, maybe your run's related to a release, right? Or maybe you have a sequential, some sequential test cases in your test set. You can set those as well, but for a nice bare bones integration, you really just need the test ID, and maybe for your sake, they're run by host ID. But you really don't need the test ID. So again, that's something you either want to parameterize or have hard code in your test case or wherever you're going to pull it from. After that, I could do a request through the command line, through curl, or through Python as I did, and I'll get this nice format back. And so you can easily check that very easily. You should get a 200 response code back, 400 if it was not able to authenticate, so on and so forth. And the key that you want to pull is this little guy right here. That's going to be our run ID. So the first step was to do the post request. The second step is to get the run ID. and the item ID. So there's my run ID. I can get that very easily from my response code. And then I'll go to this get method for my next step to use the run ID and project ID to get my item ID. Right? So same thing. Get requests. I could use curl, Python, or any kind of code or command line, and I'll get my this response back from the get. And the key you want here is this ID right here under results. Do note that this is a dictionary with some key values. You can tell how they're kind of giving it to you. And so the way I access it with code, it won't be the same way as access the first thing, which was only had I think one layer of data. So here I made sure to access it by its dictionary elements. So results, the first item in results, and then of course the ID. That's all you want. And then from there, the last two steps is to do the patch and then do the final log post. So I have my project ID, my run ID, and my item ID. I'll go ahead and do the patch. As you can see, there are my 3 items. Then I can parametrize it. And the thing is, again, you can pass a couple more items here. I passed the critical, runtime, user, and host, but you could save the test library, and of course you need to pass that status code. Now I passed the hard-coded pass, but you could parametrize that, either pass or fail, and capture that data and convert it to string from TestComplete, which I could do now, but you get the idea. Pretty simple to do that. From there, this whole section is regarding a manual test, which wouldn't really apply here, but if you want to update a manual test via the API, you can see how you can do that per step. After I send that data in, make the call, and I shouldn't get any response format back, technically, but you can technically still query the response and you'll get data back, just letting you know that, hey, it passed. And once you update that patch, last thing is to either post the HTML file or the MHT file. They only differ in the extension, either a port or a log. It's the same request, and you shouldn't get anything back if it passes. And all I'm doing is, you don't even need to actually, you could use content type application JSON, but you don't need to. All you're doing is passing in a specific file. And the way that looks like in my code is simply this. I have my, where is it? Here we go. I got my URL. I have my file. I'm making sure I have it in open on write mode, or read mode at least, so I can have access to it. I'm just passing it into my request library function, the post function here, and again checking to make sure the request is good. So that's it. So those are the 4 methods. Again, they're all going to live under test runs resources. And the ones you want to use right now is first the post. Then you want to query that post for the run ID. Then you want to use that items get. Then finally the patch, and then one of these posts here. That's it. Those 4 methods, you saw how little code I had to write to accomplish that. And we have a nice way to get our data into QAComplete. All right, so now I've kind of gone over our documentation. Of anything, I can make sure, as we send you out the video of this recording, also send out a link to this test run resources article, in case some of you don't know how to find it after the fact, to make sure that you guys are all prepared to maybe start doing your own continuous integration with TestComplete and QAComplete. All right, I'm going to take a step here to look at some other questions that we may have. All right, no questions. Please don't be shy. Feel free to ask. All right, so I think what's left on our agenda now is I've talked about this integration in general, talked about different ways we can implement it, and I've shown you specifically what methods I've used here, so you can go ahead and recreate my success. In the course, again, going to QAComplete, I want to see what the API, those API calls actually do. Go ahead and my run history, click the run history. I'll get my runtime. There's my stop on failure, passed, what host machine I'm running it on, who ran it, and of course my MHT log file I can view from my browser. So again, the beauty of this is that this is all done through the cloud, running TestComplete in some embedded VM on some machine half around the world, and get all my results in the cloud so I can go ahead and look at it, share it with people, reduce licensing overhead, so on and so forth. So now what I'll do is, I think we have one more question here. I'll answer that. And I'll talk about maybe some pros and cons of doing CI in general that maybe you guys want to weigh if it's not something you currently employ in your strategies today. All right. So can the same REST API for QAComplete work with SOAP UI? Yes. QAComplete is great in that not only can we run your functional automated front-end tests, but we can also interface with your back-end tests. So let's take a look at our automation form quickly to show what that looks like. You can see you can work with TestComplete Test Execute, some Selenium frameworks, and of course Ready API SOAP UI. And if you want to do some work on the back end, it does take some work. I could add some other agents to that list if I may. For example, load complete. We have a load testing tool. Maybe you want to manage some of those tests here at QAComplete. Add load complete to that set. So certainly you can easily do that. And you know, the idea is that now you can get a really true process together. And what's cool is that executing from Jenkins, right? Your Jenkins run, you can easily add extra build steps, right? And I'll tell you the kind of tests. So you could easily add batch files to kick off your SOAP tests and create a nice end-to-end, you know, back-end to front-end test, and then have all the results automatically put in QAComplete. And whether you want the, you know, a TestComplete test to update all that data, or maybe you want each test in SOAP UI TestComplete to update data, or maybe you want a batch file by itself to do it, certainly up to you, but of course that is possible. All right, that was a good question. So again, feel free to ask more questions here. We still have plenty of time left. Let me talk about maybe some of the other strategies we can do to make sure we are truly considering everything in our workflow when we talk about continuous integration. So what are some pros? Good pro first is, you know, with this kind of integration here, you can very easily scale distributed testing, parallel testing, and essentially simulate real world situations, right? Instead of running tests only in your local build environment, in your test environment, you can have things run concurrently in other environments, you know, actual production environments, different machines, different operating systems, so on and so forth, while you can use your own environment to, again, do more work, right? Get your data out faster. And all you have to do is what? Push your new code to a new branch, and the CS server will take care of the rest, as well as these API commands. You know, along with that, you can increase your code coverage, right? Literally with CI and using servers, you can expand the breadth in what you're testing against and what you're testing over, especially with the environments itself. It's going to speed up deploying code to production, allowing you to build stuff very quickly. In fact, you can build stuff now. And, you know, QAComplete itself has a nice test scheduling system, which, you know, we say, hey, you can use that to automate your workflow. You can do your own work. But, again, with Jenkins, I can do the same thing. Maybe you do new development through Jenkins and you do all your regression through our test scheduling system, right? Nice way to have clear pipelines there. But again, multiple strategies here you can pursue. I want to be flexible with your needs. Another great value here with CI is that you're not going to break stuff as easily, right? If you have a single pipeline that you're updating, maybe someone makes a change to the source code, they push a change, it breaks it. You go try and make your change and think stuff doesn't work. With CI, you're going to have continuous testing, you know, multiple times a day, multiple times a week, so on and so forth. So you know that before you push your code, you can easily have, you know, get the new code pushed in Jenkins, run that regression to make sure that base code works, and then merge properly. So instead of becoming some kind of, you know, heinous task to make sure your code is working, it becomes a, you know, a couple little a couple fields in your form you have to fill out, and voila, you have a nice clean merge with your new source code. And, you know, lastly, because you're updating your code so often, review will just take less time. You know, we have a nice, I'll plug our own tool Collaborator here. We have a nice tool for a code and document review you could use to also save you time, but literally using CI with free open source tools, updating and changing, or updating, sorry, and testing your code over and over again will make code review happen, you know, more infrequently, in that, you know, you have an automated process doing that for you, and it'll just be easier, it'll be quicker, right? Instead of having to say, okay, I have a week's worth of changes here, let's see what happened. You know, your changes might only have intervals of, you know, a couple hours, which is certainly more useful if you're trying to do something more in the agile type of workspace. Now, some cons, you know, maybe if you scale up, if you have to create new slaves, or whether they are VMs or machines, it's going to cost you money, right? And so if you're going to host it yourself, if your code isn't open source, it's also going to cost you money. Something, of course, to think about. Great tool like Jenkins. Jenkins is certainly free, but you want to think about, you know, how that kind of physical cost, whether in the cloud or not, will scale as you decide to scale your efforts. You know, some builds might take longer than 10 minutes. Some builds might have some subjective practices. You want to be able to automate everything, and so that's something to consider as well. You may try to push everything to CI and you realize that, oh, you know, this thing broke and the rest of my tests didn't run. Or I actually have to manually validate this, and so this whole run was useless because, you know, I didn't get that full test working properly, so on and so forth. And so that can certainly be a bit of a task to decide, what you want to automate or what not. I think actually our product owner will give a talk about that in an upcoming conference. So that's certainly an interesting topic. But that's certainly a challenge when talking about CI. What do we automate, what do we not? If you automate the wrong things, you might skip over some quality control process that should be manual. And lastly, whatever you do decide to set up, you got to maintain. So while, slave machines, servers, VMs certainly cost to buy and set up, you got to maintain them, right? If they crash, if, they are slow, it can certainly impact your testing process as well. You want to make sure there are people in your team who are capable of maintaining these things. Otherwise, you could certainly find your CI process blocked if your machine or VM stops working. And so, obviously we're trying to plug, the use of Jenkins with our tools here. But some people are aware that, every great feature certainly has its bad sides. But I'd say overall, those same cons are going to exist for a lot of other different software testing techniques, right? If you, decide to do any kind of distributed parallel testing, you're going to have cost or you're going to have more failure points available to you, right? Because you're scaling in general. So it's not like these cons are necessarily out of the blue or out of nowhere. They are expected with pursuing continuous integration. But in my opinion, the benefits certainly far outweigh the risks, especially if you have the right personnel to make sure you can scale up in a good manner. And, if you have people, and if you decide to be, flexible with how you want to upload your data. All right, so I spoke about some pros and cons of CI. So now it's about, 10:46. I want to leave some time for some questions here. Maybe if my product owner wants to come and say some things, he's, of course, more than welcome to. But if he's feeling shy today, he can certainly does not have to come up. So let me take a look at this question here. All right. All right. Cool. Thank you, Jeff, for answering that question. I'll quickly read it out to everyone else. I'm running Selenium tests in a third-party tool, which works great, but it doesn't keep the run history. You also do Jenkins runs, and the results are stored there, but it's difficult to find results for a particular test. Do you have suggestions how to get the results in the QAComplete using TestComplete? Yes, we certainly can do that. Again, you can script in Selenium, so you could easily call QAComplete's REST API calls through your Selenium script, or even through Jenkins, right? Jenkins is going to have that data, so you can easily query Jenkins API directly. All this stuff's open source, maybe in a batch file, and easily put that data in the QAComplete. Certainly a great way, very similar to the way I did it. Oh, we had our guest here. I did not notice.
I just completely surprised you.
All right.
Yeah, I'm normally shy. Although I'm either have a cold or I'm allergic to Param, one or the other.
It's all right. It's cold for my own sanity.
So, yeah, my yes answer was going to be a little more thorough out loud, I think, but you kind of covered it.
Cool.
Look, the whole intent of the REST API is we don't really care what CI system you're using, what frameworks you're using, what kind of testing you're doing. It gives you the ability to push in the results kind of no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, Team City running scripts out of, a unit framework I've never heard of. Fine. The intent here is to give you a way to push all of that over. So we use TestComplete and Jenkins because those are the ones we get asked for. It just is. We sell TestComplete. Jenkins is very popular. And we couldn't show you everything because it'd be very boring. It's the same thing again.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's really a method. All the concepts apply. The coding might be different. Little, not much.
Not much.
Because that's the beauty of REST APIs.
Yeah. And again, I should point out multiple ways to do this. You don't have to use, you could even use, I think we have a Swagger defined instance. Let me see if I can find it. GP.
God, I love Swagger.
Yeah.
I know we're all sponsoring it and we own it. But one of the better things we've ever actually added to QAComplete from my perspective is the Swagger definitions because this makes API consumption a lot easier.
Oh, it's great.
Especially for people who are, I'll go with more visual, like me.
And same here. I mean, I know for me, looking at big documentation of all gray, black text is a little tough. Here, everything's color-coded by the command. We can find our run. So here, for example, adds new test run. This was that post that we looked at first. You can see a nice way to view all the metadata, whether in a model schema format or in this nice-looking model format. And instead of maybe writing code or something like that, as Jeff pointed out, use a nice Swagger interface. Just use the form here. So maybe if you're just setting this up, you want to test out the water. No, don't spend any time building code, right? That could be time consuming. Just go ahead and use the same methods I showed you in this screen here. Easy recreate that process.
Right. So one of the things I will mention is, we've showed you some of the how, but there are decisions to be made in how you do this. For instance, you may not want to push results every time the script is run, maybe only certain times, right? So you might, put conditionals in the if statements, right?
Mhm.
Maybe you want to run it on every nightly build to push that over, but not ad hoc testing of the script just when you feel like running it for whatever reason. Similarly, Kim, your question about the Selenium tests, right? So pushing those over, you end up with the same piece. Where in the test do you push? Is it every single component of the test if you're doing something modular, or do you push it as results, bigger set of them? Maybe you're running through 30 scripts and you're pushing the whole thing. Those all have their own consequences, and we should give you guidance on those, but we're not going to because we have other stuff we should talk about.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna have to do that another time. But those pieces are actually really hard to figure out what's efficient, and it does go to some of that maintenance stuff Param was talking about.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, what's the goal here? Trying to save yourselves time in your testing process so you can get your code out faster, make sure it's at the highest quality, et cetera, et cetera. But certainly before you dive into something like this, again, as you decide to scale as well, Jeff makes a great point. Really think about how your current process exists now and what parts of CI you want to implement and where.
All right. So I know we got like 9 minutes left here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do my usual 301 thing, right?
Nice.
So the way we structure these out is the 301s are really driven by you guys. We don't just come up with good concepts and try to talk about them. This was something that was asked by a ton of people they wanted to see more of.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do that without your feedback. So I really would love it if you guys can tell us more about how this went, if you got what you wanted out of this for all those people who requested it, and what we can do in the future on these 301 sessions. The 101s are really meant for people who are brand new to the tool. The 201s is a little bit more advanced, a lot of team leader stuff. But the 301s are meant to be kind of whatever it is you guys need to hear.
Yeah. We've had some great topics in the past. I believe the last 201, Jeff and product market manager for CBT, cross-border testing, they covered doing live testing on the cloud using QAComplete. There's a way to record your manual tests.
Yeah, environments, yeah.
But running over different environments using cross-border testing's platform. Super cool there. We talked about automated testing through QAComplete before this, I believe, another 301 way back. And now, obviously, we're trying to push into CI. So, whatever you guys are trying to do, please, as you said, send it through us, and we'll see what we can do.
All right. Also, tell me if this stuff was helpful. It's always important for us.
Yeah.
Although I'm guessing by the number of people who signed up for it, it was. But there was a lot of you guys interested in CI. I think we hit a nerve. One other piece I'll throw in a random little plug here. We are going to be starting a SmartBear webinar series for continuous integration. That's outside of the Academy program. It's more of a high-level thing. It's not going to be just for customers, but it will cover kind of the approach of CI, and we'll make sure that you guys get the invites. We're pretty good about hammering people with marketing invites. So, but there's going to be a 3-part at least series on that coming up throughout the end of the year.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, we'll do last call here for any questions, and then.
Oh, and actually, this is the last Academy session before some of our conferences that are coming up. For anybody who doesn't know, I'd be shocked, but we just had our own user conference last week, and really? I can see. Yeah, oh really? I can see a lot of names that I met there. Hello, Evie. I still have to talk to you, but the conference is coming up. If you guys are going to any, make sure you hunt us down. If you're there, we're probably there. I'll be at Star West myself, talking, as Param mentioned, about what to automate. But any of the conferences coming up, we are probably there. Swing by. We'll make sure you find a beer, and we'll go there.
Of course. And if I met any of you at the Atlassian conference last week and you were there, pleasure to meet you as well, and hope that you are getting good use out of our tools.
Great.
All right.
All right, guys. I got nothing else, Param. You?
No, I think I'm all set today.
Thank you both. Thank you. Yes. And as a reminder for anyone who was not on at the beginning, we did record this 301 class. A little bit different of how you'll be getting the recordings. Not going to be coming from customers at smartbear.com, the email that you're used to seeing from Christina. It will be coming from GoToWebinar directly. So keep an eye out for that. You will be getting the recording, and if you do forward it over to anyone who wasn't registered, they will just have to put in their name and information, and they'll get access to the recording. It's not for any lead gen purposes. It's just the function of how GoToWebinar does it. But we want to get these videos to you faster, and this is the fastest avenue to do it for you. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you on future classes. And like Jeff mentioned in the exit survey, one of the questions does ask you future topics for 301. Let us know, and we hope to see you on future Academy classes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Param.
Thanks, guys.
Of course. Have
Thanks,
a wonderful
Param.
day, everybody. Of course.
Haircut.